Ladies and gentlemen, you ever ask yourself, why in a world full of shifting alliances and whispered promises, do some nations keep getting a seat at the table, while others just as powerful, just as principled are left standing? Why does the United States, the so-called beacon of democracy, lean into certain friendships? Even when the facts don't line up, let's talk real, let's talk plain, because history doesn't lie, but people sure do. Now, Pakistan and India, two countries, two stories, two nuclear powers, both vital, both complex, but one keeps getting the benefit of the doubt even when the doubt should be screaming. The U.S. says it wants peace. Yet it keeps selling weapons, writing checks, and turning a blind eye when terror finds safe harbor. Why? Because strategy trumps principle, because geography matters, because some relationships were carved not with trust, but with utility. The U.S. needs leverage in Afghanistan, it needs a foothold near China, it needs eyes and ears in unstable terrain, and for decades Pakistan played that part willingly. India, world's largest democracy, a rising economic giant, a leader in tech science space, a nation that stood on its own 2 feet without begging for scraps. But sometimes standing tall makes the world uncomfortable. Sometimes independence makes you less easy to control. And when you're hard to control, they call you a threat. But let me tell you something, being principled is not a threat. Standing for your own people is not aggression, and refusing to be a pawn, that's courage. See, this isn't about which country wears the white hat. Nobody's hands are clean, but truth. Truth is not about picking sides, it's about seeing clearly, and what we see if we dare to look is a pattern. Aid goes to where influence is needed. Praise goes to those who play the part, and silence. Silence follows the allies who serve a purpose, no matter how murky. But here's what they forget. You can't build long-term peace on short-term alliances. You can't keep pretending that the world's largest democracy is a second thought. And you can't ignore a billion voices just because they speak with pride. When we talk about international relations, it's easy to get caught up in headlines, in dramatic moments, in the surface-level narratives that flood our screens. But underneath all of that is something colder, more calculated. Strategy. The world's biggest powers, including the United States, don't always act based on ideals or shared values. They act based on what serves their interests, and that's where strategic utility comes into play. The U.S., time and again, has shown that it values relationships that are useful, not necessarily those that are morally aligned or democratic. It's not about who's right, it's about who's useful. Pakistan, for decades, has played a very specific role in American foreign policy. It has acted as a bridge into South Asia and as a player in the U.S. strategic presence near Central Asia and the Middle East. This utility matters more to American policymakers than questions of democracy, human rights, or long-term alignment of values. Pakistan's location is no accident in this equation. It's a neighbor to Afghanistan, a country the U.S. was involved in militarily for over 2 decades. When the U.S. needed supply routes, intelligence access, or local cooperation during the War on Terror, Pakistan was right there. It offered logistical pathways, military intelligence, and access to regional affairs that India, by choice or principle, wouldn't offer. That made Pakistan strategically useful. That use was enough to overlook inconsistencies, contradictions, and uncomfortable truth. It didn't matter if the U.S. publicly spoke about democracy, because in practice, strategy came first. And even when Pakistan's role in harboring terrorist networks became evident, when Osama bin Laden was found living in Abbottabad, not far from a major military base, it didn't unravel the relationship entirely, because strategic utility doesn't vanish with scandal. If anything, it just gets reevaluated. The question in Washington isn't always what did they do, but more often are they still useful? When the answer is yes, aid continues, military cooperation continues, the selective silence continues. On the other side, you have India, a country that has consistently positioned itself as an independent force in global politics. It hasn't allowed itself to be pulled into military alliances or dominated by Western influence. India buys from multiple countries, speaks on its own terms, and doesn't easily fall in line. That makes India less pliable, less predictable, less useful, at least in the way Washington defines usefulness. India is the world's largest democracy, a growing economy, a rising tech power, and a country that can arguably be a long-term partner to the U.S. But strategic utility doesn't always favor long-term thinking. It favors leverage, it favors convenience, it favors short-term wins over difficult but meaningful partnerships. That's why a less democratic, more volatile, and often more contradictory partner like Pakistan can receive more support at key moments. Because it gives the U.S. what it wants right now. This logic becomes even more apparent when you look at military aid packages, weapons deals, and diplomatic postures. The U.S. has at various points cut deals with Pakistan that wouldn't pass the test of values or principles. Billions in military aid have flowed in, even when accountability was questionable. The justification, strategic importance. It's always the same answer, no matter the administration in power. Whether it's about counterterrorism, regional stability, or China's growing footprint, Pakistan keeps coming up as a necessary partner, and that necessity keeps the relationship alive, even when trust is eroded. Even when the people in both countries on the ground have doubts, even when lawmakers raise concerns, because again, it's not about moral clarity, it's not about consistency, it's about usefulness in the chessboard of international power. And as long as a country provides leverage, the U.S. is willing to overlook a lot. Strategic utility explains why principles are often sidelined. It's why words like democracy and freedom can be spoken with passion on a podium and yet ignored behind closed doors. It's why a country with deep-rooted democratic institutions like India can still find itself sidelined in moments that require political boldness or military preference. India's problem isn't that it isn't worthy. It's that it isn't easy to use, and in a world where strategy trumps principle, ease of use often decides where support goes. Geography plays a silent but powerful role in global politics. When the United States looks at the world map, it doesn't just see nations. It sees access points, choke points, and regional leverage. Pakistan, for all its internal instability and political contradictions, occupies a piece of land that has been critical to American military and strategic interests for decades. The physical proximity to Afghanistan, Iran, China, and Central Asia gives Pakistan a kind of geopolitical weight that far exceeds its economic or democratic standing. This is not a coincidence. It's a major reason the U.S. keeps turning toward Pakistan when formulating its foreign policy in South Asia. The American presence in Afghanistan after 2001 thrust Pakistan into the spotlight. With no direct borders into the war zone, the U.S. needed land and air access for its military operations. Pakistan became a crucial partner in this regard. Supply chains for food, fuel, and ammunition passed through Pakistani ports and roads. Drone bases and intelligence operations operated with varying levels of cooperation from the Pakistani military and inter-services intelligence agency. It wasn't a perfect relationship, far from it, but it was functional. And in the world of foreign policy, function often outweighs loyalty or transparency. Even beyond the Afghanistan war, Pakistan's location has kept it relevant. It borders Iran, a country the U.S. sees as a long-term adversary. It borders China, America's principal strategic competitor in the 21st century. It borders India, a growing power that the U.S. wants to align with, but on American terms, with Pakistan. The U.S. gets a front row seat to several geopolitical theaters, and that access is too valuable to sacrifice over moral disagreements or policy disputes. Geopolitical leverage also manifests through military positioning, American reliance on intelligence. Sharing with Pakistan's security establishment was born out of necessity, not trust. And while the reliability of that intelligence has often been questioned, the fact remains that being on the inside, even in a flawed system, is seen as better than being left out entirely. The U.S. has tolerated double games, policy contradictions, and internal instability in Pakistan because walking away would mean losing visibility in a region where visibility equals control. Another factor is nuclear deterrence. Pakistan is a nuclear-armed country, and with its history of political volatility and extremist influences, its nuclear arsenal has always been a matter of concern. That concern doesn't push the U.S. away, it pulls it closer. Engagement becomes a tool of influence. The logic is simple. Stay close so you can manage the threat, not because you believe in the partner. The idea is to be in the room where decisions are made, or at least close enough to influence them. Geography gives the U.S. that justification, that reason to stay involved in Pakistan's internal affairs, regardless of how problematic those affairs might be. China's rise has also amplified Pakistan's geopolitical value in American eyes. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, part of Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative, cuts directly through Pakistan. This massive infrastructure and investment project gives China land access to the Arabian Sea and deeper influence in South Asia. To the U.S., this is a strategic red flag. It adds another layer to Pakistan's importance, not because the U.S. wants to compete with China in Pakistan per se, but because ignoring Pakistan would mean ceding more ground to Beijing in a region that's already becoming more multipolar. So Pakistan becomes not just a country but a counterweight, a tool in a broader containment strategy. India, while a natural partner for many reasons, does not offer the same geographic access. It is less entangled in Central Asian politics. It does not offer direct land routes to conflict zones, and it doesn't provide the kind of plug-in military utility the U.S. has often prioritized. While India's geographic location is powerful in its own right, particularly with respect to maritime influence and the Indo-Pacific, it does not serve the same tactical function as Pakistan in land-based operations. That's not a reflection of weakness but of positioning, and when decisions are made in Washington, maps often matter more than manifestos. Pakistan's ability to sit at the crossroads of so many U.S. interests has allowed it to maintain relevance, even when trust was low and alignment was weak. Its geography provides an excuse for continued engagement, a justification for aid, and a reason to maintain military ties. The U.S. doesn't have to like everything Pakistan does. It just has to calculate what it gains by staying close. That gain is often seen through a geographic lens. India has never been a country that follows orders quietly. It has always chosen its own path, sometimes at the cost of international approval, sometimes in defiance of global expectations. This independence is not accidental. It is rooted in history, in a national identity forged through struggle, resilience, and an unshakable commitment to sovereignty. That very independence, while admired by many, poses a challenge for nations like the United States that are accustomed to shaping alliances to suit their strategic narratives. When a country like India refuses to be a follower, it disrupts the pattern. It becomes difficult to control, and in international politics, difficulty often translates to discomfort. India's foreign policy has long been guided by the principle of strategic autonomy. From the early days of the non-aligned movement to its current multi-vector diplomacy, India has consistently avoided becoming a pawn in great power rivalries. It has traded with Russia and the United States at the same time. It has forged defense deals with France, Israel, and the U.S., while maintaining strong energy ties with Iran. It participates in the Quad with the U.S., Japan, and Australia, while also holding military exercises with China and Russia. This flexibility serves India's national interest, but it doesn't fit neatly into the binary frameworks that the United States often prefers. That alone makes India a more complex partner, and complexity often gets misread as resistance. In contrast, countries that align quickly with U.S. interests, whether through military alliances, intelligence sharing, or compliance with sanctions, are often rewarded with support, aid, and political backing. Their value lies in predictability. Pakistan, despite all its contradictions, has frequently offered that predictability in a transactional sense. When asked to deliver something, whether military access or intelligence cooperation, it generally did, even if inconsistently. India, on the other hand, makes decisions on its own terms, and that self-directed approach limits how much influence the U.S. can exert behind the scenes. When a nation doesn't need your approval, it's harder to manipulate its choices. India's strong civil institutions, democratic framework, and stable governance make it a natural partner for the U.S. on paper. But these very qualities also contribute to its independent thinking. A strong domestic political mandate allows Indian leaders to make foreign policy decisions that serve long-term national interests, not just temporary alliances. This independence has led India to take stances that do not always align with U.S. agendas. For example, India continued to buy oil from Russia during the Ukraine conflict, despite Western sanctions. It has also refused to condemn certain nations outright when the West expected it to. These moves are not signs of defiance for the sake of it. They reflect a clear calculation about what best serves the Indian people. But from a Washington perspective, this can appear as non-cooperation. The United States, historically, has favored alliances where it can exert influence, whether through military presence, economic dependency, or political alignment. India's refusal to fall into those molds limits the depth of the U.S.-India relationship in the eyes of American policymakers who are used to commanding rather than negotiating. When a country insists on equality in the relationship, it challenges the traditional power dynamic. India doesn't want to be a client state. It wants to be a strategic partner, but on equal footing. That desire for parity is often misunderstood or underappreciated. India's military independence is another area that makes it harder to control. Despite deepening defense ties with the U.S., India still relies heavily on Russian-made weaponry, continues to build indigenous platforms, and resists binding military alliances. This makes India less reliant on any single power, and therefore less pliable. When you're not dependent, you're harder to pressure, and that lack of leverage complicates negotiations. While the U.S. may respect India's strength in public, in private, it's clear that Washington would prefer a more malleable partner, one that says yes more often than no. There is also a cultural dimension. India has a deeply rooted sense of civilizational pride. It sees itself not as a regional player, but as a global power in its own right. This world doesn't sit comfortably with nations that are used to seeing developing countries as junior partners. When India speaks at the United Nations, when it mediates conflicts, or when it asserts its views on global governance, It does so from a place of self-assured identity. It doesn't seek permission. That self-assurance, while respected by some, can feel like a challenge to others who are used to setting the terms of engagement. In diplomacy, tone matters as much as policy, and India's tone is not one of deference. Short-term alliances are the currency of convenience in global politics. They are built quickly, often in response to crises or strategic needs, and just as quickly abandoned when they no longer serve immediate interests. These alliances prioritize immediate utility access, cooperation, leverage over long-term alignment of values, stability, or mutual growth. The United States, as a global superpower with wide-reaching interests, has historically leaned on short-term alliances to achieve tactical goals. The relationship with Pakistan is one of the clearest examples of this strategy in action. When the United States invaded Afghanistan after 9/11, it needed a regional partner that could provide logistical support and intelligence access. Pakistan, with its shared border and military infrastructure, became that partner almost overnight. Billions of dollars in military and civilian aid flowed into Pakistan. Strategic dialogues were initiated. A transactional relationship took shape, fueled not by trust or long-term vision, but by the urgency of war. This was a classic short-term alliance, formed under pressure and guided by narrow objectives. It succeeded in providing what the U.S. needed in the moment, but it left behind a fragile, unstable foundation that couldn't support a broader, more sustainable partnership. In contrast, long-term stability requires something more than convenience. It requires shared values, mutual respect, transparent communication, and consistent policy alignment. India, with its strong democratic institutions, growing economy, and global ambitions, offers all the components of a long-term partner. But such partnerships demand patience, investment, and the willingness to accept differences. They don't deliver quick wins or easy compliance. And that is why, time and again, long-term stability has taken a back seat to short-term gains in U.S. foreign policy. The challenge with short-term alliances is that they are inherently unstable. They are built on shifting sands, temporary needs, political fluctuations, and opportunistic alignment. Once the conditions change, the alliance weakens. This is exactly what has happened in the U.S.-Pakistan relationship when the war in Afghanistan ended and U.S. military interests in the region diminished. The value of the partnership began to fade. Suspicion grew, cooperation declined, and frustrations surfaced. The trust that was never fully built began to erode even further. Yet despite these issues, the legacy of that short-term alliance continues to shape how the U.S. engages with South Asia. India, on the other hand, has remained consistent in its global posture. It has pursued partnerships, not dependencies. It has maintained a principled foreign policy that prioritizes its own interests without being antagonistic. While it has collaborated with the U.S. on defense, trade, and technology, it has never compromised on its sovereignty. This makes India a more difficult partner in the short term, but a far more reliable one over time. The problem is that kind of reliability doesn't always get rewarded. In fact, it often gets overlooked. Washington's preference for quick returns can create a cycle of missed opportunities. By focusing on what a country can provide now, rather than what it can build toward in the future, the U.S. risks alienating the very partners who offer the most enduring value. The U.S.-India relationship has seen periods of warmth, strategic alignment, and joint declarations, but it has never reached the full potential of a long-term alliance. The hesitation often lies in India's refusal to be pulled into short-term deals that don't align with its long-term vision. There is also a structural issue at play. American foreign policy is heavily influenced by electoral cycles, congressional pressures, and shifting priorities. This makes long-term planning difficult. Strategic patience is often sacrificed for policy wins that can be showcased in election speeches or press conferences. In that environment, the appeal of a short-term alliance, where results can be seen quickly and headlines are easier to generate, often outweighs the slower, more demanding process of building a lasting partnership. This short-term mindset doesn't just affect diplomatic relationships, it affects regional stability. When the U.S. throws its weight behind partners based on temporary needs, it can disrupt regional balances and create incentives for opportunistic behavior. It signals to other nations that loyalty isn't as important as usefulness, that values can be sidelined if the stakes are high enough. Over time, this undermines credibility. Allies begin to question the depth of U.S. commitments, rivals exploit the gaps, and countries like India, who might otherwise deepen their alignment, choose caution over trust. So why does the U.S. back Pakistan over India? Because it's easier. For now, but the world is changing. India's not waiting for approval. It's building, rising, innovating, and one day, real soon, it won't be a question of who America chooses. It'll be a question of whether America kept up. Thank you.